Are you ready to break free from a conventional life and achieve financial independence through your version of tiny living, but you're feeling stuck trying to figure out the money part? Does the pressure to conform to societal norms make it even more difficult to embrace an unconventional lifestyle? Well, you're in the right place. I'm Laura Lynch, host of the Less House, More Moolah podcast, where every Thursday I'll bring you captivating interviews with individuals who have successfully made the transition to tiny living. They defied expectations and are thriving in their unique lives. We'll also dive deep into industry resources to address common financial concerns on your tiny journey. Together, we'll explore the emotional and practical aspects of pursuing an alternative lifestyle. I will describe a clear framework for project planning and cash flow management. Our goal is to intentionally build financial security and make a positive impact through our alternative American dream. So gear up for an exciting and empowering journey to create a life that truly resonates with you. Let's dive into today's episode and take the first steps towards financial independence and purpose through tiny living. So Melanie Copeland, thank you so much for joining me today on Less House, More Moolah. I feel totally thrilled to have this conversation with you today. It's so funny. You and I sort of like passed in the wind when we were at a tiny house festival recently, and I saw you and I'm like, oh, I should talk to her. And then by the time I got there, there's like a line like out the door of people trying to talk to you. Were you signing books that day?
I believe I was, and thank you for having me on your show. I'm excited to be here with you too. I believe that was the Georgia event,
right,
and
yeah.
That place was packed. And you were not the only person that messaged me afterwards and was like, it was hot, and I just could not stand in that line, and it didn't seem like the line got shorter because it was a very long day for me.
Yes, there were so many people there. And, I think one of the things I took away from that, and then I was at another one the weekend prior, is just the diversity of people that we're seeing in the tiny, community events, which I love that. I love just seeing, so many different people.
Oh, it's fun. And just getting all their different perspectives and getting to talk to them. And I'm never bored at the events. I leave with communication overload by the time I walk away from it, because I'm like, oh my goodness, I need 3 days to not talk to anybody, because you just have to take in all the different stories and everything that everybody tells you. And it's pretty amazing. So, yeah.
Awesome. So listeners, if you haven't gone to a tiny house show or expo yet, you should probably try to find one, because it's a really neat event. So Melanie, if you would share with listeners kind of your backstory on tiny house, like how did that idea first occur to you and why?
Okay. So we're going to go back about almost 6 years. I was working full time, and both my husband and I were working. It's about 5 jobs between both of us. And we were looking into buying a home in our area, and we weren't home very much. So, we were kind of toying with the idea. We got pre-approved, and we were looking at these townhouses and stuff to buy. And they're like $700,000 for a townhouse with a leaky basement. And I'm like, oh, yay. And every house that we're going through, I'm like, oh, this would be perfect. Can I just tear down this whole wall? And my husband's like, if the first thing you think when you walk into a place is I want to tear down the wall, then this is not the house for you. And so we were having a really hard time. There were not a lot of houses on the market. I know it's a worse situation now, but when we were looking, it was still very difficult in our area to find something that was affordable and that was in a nicer neighborhood. And so we were struggling, and I was just getting fed up. And finally I had found this little gal on a YouTube video, and her name was Jenny Dreads. I've never found her again. So if anybody else out there ever finds a Jenny Dreads, thank you to her. She lived in this little camper in a backyard, and she had her couple chickens and her little solar lights and everything. And I was like, I just want to do that. I just want to do that. And So we kind of gave up the house search because we weren't finding anything. At that time, I had been through 5 layoffs, and they seemed to be coming almost every year. So every time it would get to the point where the company was going to start offering the 401k and the, full retirement packages and all this stuff, it was just lay off and hire somebody new. And it was right before Christmas, and in came the next layoff. And I just kind of said, I'm done. I'm done with all of this stuff. And so I had spoken with my husband and then kind of showed him the Jenny Dreads thing and we didn't find a lot of like tiny houses on wheels, like what I'm in, but we did find a lot of the RV or van conversions and stuff seemed to be more popular back then. It was just different than it is now. And so we were not really able to get into the tiny house on wheels idea until we found Incredible Tiny Homes. And my husband actually found that. And then he came home and he said, let's just go build a tiny house in 7 days. And I was like, yeah, right. I just had been out of knee surgery about a year. My confidence was shot. I was exhausted. I had spent, 7 years just trying to hold on to a job. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm just going to, drive over to Tennessee and build a house in 7 days, honey, with, my reconstructed knee and crying myself to sleep and not making it in this world, even though I was working really hard. So we did. We took the chance and we just went and did it. But that's kind of a wrap. So I don't know. That's kind of where my life was. It was a mess. It was just a complete mess when we started.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and kind of going back to what you and I had talked about before, you were doing all the things. You were doing the things that you're supposed to do. And yet the path just wasn't working.
Right. I mean, we were checking boxes. Like we did get married young, but we didn't have a lot of debt. We both went to college because that's what you're supposed to do, is go to college. And we both had good jobs, decent paying jobs. And we needed 5 of them between the two of us to cover our very basic bills, which were not as much as some people have. And I was looking at my neighbors and people around me, and I'm thinking like, I'm barely making this, and they have kids and they have 3 or 4 cars. And, we each had 1 car, and we were paying the minimum on everything that we could. And we're not making it. And I'm just like, hey, none of this is working. And I keep doing what my parents told me to do, or my friends are like, hey, try this, or pick up a side hustle, or do this. And you kind of reach a point where you're just like, how many side hustles do I need to just be able to put food on my table tonight? I mean, at what point does this not make sense anymore? I'm going to side hustle myself to death here, trying to just eat. And so, so that was, didn't work for us, did not work for us.
So how did your friends and your family that were, kind of always, giving you the idea of how to do the normal thing react when you went out and did something so different?
So my mom was a little bit worried, but my mom was kind of like hippie-ish when she was younger. And she was like a park ranger and lived in a van for a while and stuff. So I think she'd done a little bit of van life. And she kind of was like, are you going to really sell everything and go build this house? Is this going to, I'm not sure, but she didn't really want to come out and be like, don't do it. In fact, she helped us finance it. But I think she held her breath because I think she knew that I was done through our conversation. And my mother-in-law actually came and helped us build, which was very cool. So John's mom was there the whole time we were building and helping build our home. And I had more kickback from my friends who are not my friends anymore. A few of them have tried to come back in and be like, how'd you make it happen now that they're experiencing financial problems? And I'm just like, oh, here's a copy of my book. Leave me alone. Because it was, some of them were pretty nasty. And I was already in a place where I was, my confidence was already really low and I was struggling. just, trying to figure out, we would pay all of our bills and we would have like $80 left for the next 2 weeks to eat and get gas and hope that nothing broke in the next 2 weeks. And so, I mean, when you're sitting at that level and you've got all your bills paid and you've got nothing left to really live on, and you're just in that survival state of like, what do I do next? And you've kind of figured a way where you may be able to get out of this, and people put you down for it. Those people disappear. But I had people who told me that my marriage would end if it lasted a year in the tiny, that we would be lucky. And this year will be 23 years married for us. We've been just fine in the tiny house for almost
For the record.
For the record, like still doing just fine. But, I mean, and there is a perception around that. I do understand we're a culture that thrives on, more and bigger and better and all that kind of stuff. And when you tell somebody that you just want to sell everything you own and go live in a tiny house, they're looking at you and I don't even think that they're like trying to be mean about it. I think that they have no way to comprehend what that means. Like they're sitting there thinking about selling their stuff and what it would mean to them, but not what it would mean like for me when they were saying the mean things to me. So after some self-reflection from all the people that were not so nice, I've kind of realized that was their journey, and it isn't for everybody. But I think it's just very hard when you're raised in a culture that this is the norm and you're stepping outside of it. They don't know how to react to that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we're all wired to conform, right? That's
right.
How we sort of survive. It's that, herding mentality. And that's just, biology. We're just wired to do that. And so when you step out and self-direct your life and everybody else is back there in the herd going, what's happening? They feel it's dangerous, right? Because it is dangerous to step out. We survived all those millennia by sticking together. So, it's just kind of a natural reaction, but it's something that you have to anticipate. If you're going to do this, you got to figure out how you're going to deal with that, because it is going to feel weird to do something different.
It feels, and it makes you question everything you're doing as if you hadn't already been questioning it. Because, John and I had been talking a lot and trying to figure out like how we would make it work. And we're going through the whole process for ourselves. And then it's just like, oh, I'm just going to beat you down with this is bad, bad, bad. And you're sitting there going, well, should I really do it? And it's scary. I don't care what way you spin it. It was scary. Yeah, sure. And to do all of that, of course, people don't want to see you fail and they don't want to see you lose everything but I mean, we were sitting at a position in our lives where one missed paycheck meant we were going to lose everything anyways.
Yeah.
What are you going to take from me at this point? Like I'm already sitting in a situation where one more layoff or one more thing could potentially make me homeless. So if you're telling me that this is a bad idea, which many of them did, I'm thinking, well, I'm already in a bad place. So I can't, your negative vibe on this doesn't justify the fact that tomorrow I may not be able to pay my rent here. And then what are you going to do? Are you going to step up and help me with that? No, probably not. So those opinions fell to the wayside very quickly because our situation was one where we were probably not going to make it there much longer.
So you ran off to Tennessee to do this thing, and you did it so fast in 7 days, right? You all built this thing in 7 days. So what did you learn about yourself in those 7 days?
So those 7 days are like a blur. And you work, they don't offer this anymore, but at the time you stayed in a warehouse and they had like a bunk room and they would feed you breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so you would wake up early and you would work and then you'd break for lunch, but you didn't leave this building for 7 days. I never even saw a sunrise or a sunset for 7 days. All I saw were wood and tools and men telling me, like supervisors and stuff around all the workers, the men around the building and everything telling me, hey, doing good or whatever. It was a very positive environment to be in. And the things that I took away from that is now I was just out of a knee surgery. So I told John, I physically cannot be like hanging the ceiling and being down on my knee, putting in the hardwood floor. Although I did a little bit of everything, I couldn't do the same amount. So I said, well, teach me how to use the tools, because that I can do. If you show me how to use the tools, I'll learn them. And I've always been a pretty mechanical person. And I learned that I really loved that. And I think having been in a corporate job where you'd sat behind a desk all day and, click, click, click on the computer, and that I never want to do that again, ever. I have definitely found my passion in building and creating, and I do not do this professionally, but like we have added things onto our home, and I really love being able to work with my hands. So if I was to go back into another job, I would probably pick something that was much more hands-on. I also learned that the corporate life isn't the real world. And I think I was so caught up in that because that's what you were supposed to do, right? Have the corner office and get the promotion, get the pay raise and da, 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 da. And, I was around just people who were talking about their problems or, their kids and bringing their dogs to work with them and laughing. And I forgot a lot of that. Like I had forgotten to have fun because for 7 years I hadn't had any fun. I was just dying inside trying to survive. And so I think it kind of brought me back to life in that 7 days, being like, hey, wait a minute, you're a human being. You're getting up and you're moving your body. Even though you're still recovering from a knee surgery, you were able to learn and do this stuff. And not only do that, but love it. And now I get banned from Lowe's a lot. But and I think just realizing that the world wasn't as cutthroat, people weren't as awful as the people that I had been around for many, many years. And I was around a lot of people that were very unhappy. And I think that had made me very unhappy. And that 7 days broke that for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like really such a perspective shift. You and I share this in common. Like I love, working with tools, and framing is the most fulfilling thing because it just so fast, you get this thing up in the air and it just seems magical. And it does, working with your hands on a project like that, where you're building a home, it just totally shifts your perspective on everything. And it can be, in the right environment, so fun, and does really take you out of that like cutthroat, competitive world where everything is on a screen. And
because there's like a teamwork. I mean, you have something that you're completing, and it's going to like roll away, or you're going to move into it or whatever, but it has to be completed. And you have to put so many nails in it, so many screws and so many boards. And if everybody doesn't work together, then it doesn't get done. Sure. So it's not like one person can just be like, hey, did you see her using that nail gun the wrong way? You need to go over there and talk to the boss. No, because the goal was to finish the house, right? So there wasn't anybody like trying to, they're trying to laugh me out of things because we got tired and we got, hungry, and, we'd have to break for food and we'd be hangry, and it was like, rah, rah, finish this house. But at the same time, like we all came back to finish it. And we had the goal. That was the goal. There was a project to finish. And in the corporate world, it wasn't like that for me.
Yeah. So you went from layoff to sort of like existential crisis, and then you went to Tennessee and you built a house for 7 days, and then you dedicated the rest of your life essentially to this cause, right? Because now you're a global advocate and a spokesperson, and you've written a book. And like, why? What about this like turned into such a lifelong passion for you?
Well, I didn't become an advocate right away. So when we first moved back to Virginia, we lived in our tiny house on wheels in my friend's backyard for almost a year, and we were hiding because I had scoured the state and I could find nowhere where I could park my tiny house and be allowed to live in it. And so my first year of living tiny, although I was happy to I had my home and we built it and we had all this pride in it, I couldn't share it really with a lot of people. I couldn't tell people where I was. I had to pretend like I wasn't home at night and keep the lights off. I couldn't put chairs or have a deck out front because I didn't want people to think I was living there. And then we were doing all the staining on the outside of it. So we were like, well, if anybody bothers us about it, we'll just say, we're building it. Eventually the house got done and then we couldn't say we were building it anymore. But so our first year was not like a wonderful year. It was very scary, and it was coming home every day waiting for a fine or a letter on the door and knowing that there wasn't anywhere else for me to move my house to in this state that I could find. And so I got on the phone and I started making calls, and I was calling every campground in the whole state, just trying that if I did come home and there was a note on the door, that I would have a place to take my house to. Because at this point I didn't. And we ended up finding a campground that would accept us for like a season. And then they would do like an extended stay and put you back on a season. But it was expensive. And it was a really big campground. And I thought, hey, at least if we move there, we'll be like somewhat legal. We're still kind of the gray area, but we're not like hiding in the backyard anymore. We'll be, where we're a little more accepted. So we went to the campground for 7 months before I was able to legalize the land that we are on now. And this goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier, where it's like, you check all the boxes, right? You do all the right things and nothing works. And it was what we knew going into this, that we were not going to find a legal place to park our tiny house on wheels, because we had already been searching for that. And I was kind of to the point where, hey, I have done everything right. Like, I have a good marriage. I've gone to college. I've worked the jobs. I've done whatever. I'm done playing by the rules. The rules don't work. I quit. I'm done. And I'm going to go live in her backyard and come and find me. Because it doesn't make sense to deny people housing for safe and proper homes just because of zoning or building codes, not because of the inability to have like quality of life or something. So I think once you live through that, and I don't know how to say that other than I think you have to live through something like that. We had been in the backyard for about a week. And the lady who did the workshop 1 week before us, her workshop was after us. She had moved it to a rural spot here in Virginia. And a week after she got there, I got the phone call that the neighbors had been over there screaming and yelling at her and telling her to get that piece out of the property. And she was paying rent to be there. And she had nowhere to go. And it took 1 week. And I'm sitting in that backyard thinking, I am visible from the road. There's a police station behind me. The cops are cruising up and down the street every day. If they want me gone, I'm gone. Like, there's nothing going to be able to save me here. But the neighbors liked me. And I loved, being in my friend's backyard, and we got to like work together. It was a very nice situation. We're still good friends. But that was the first call. And then the calls kept coming. And then it was, hey, what do I do if they show up? Or what do I say if this? And I'm trying to figure out the same thing, because I'm like, well, what am I supposed to say if they show up? Because I don't know what to say either. And so it's just this whole learning process based around fear of being able to live in a home that you built because a city or a county doesn't like zoning or building codes. And when you get enough of those calls and they keep coming and they keep coming, and you're listening to people cry and say, when I legalized this land, I said, I don't have to hide anymore. I'm not fighting anymore. And there's no reason that this should be considered illegal because it has wheels or because it's too small. I don't really care. We have a housing problem in this country. We have sustainable living problems in this country. We have eco-friendly problems in this country. We have, low wages. We have all kinds of problems. And tiny houses should be allowed in for whoever wants to have them. And so that really pushed me forward in that I want people to have a place to go. I don't care if it's only, 5 places in a state, but they should at least be there. It shouldn't be a flat out no everywhere. And so that's when I started working, because I thought I couldn't speak when I was hiding. And I could have probably spoken from the campground a little bit, but still. But when I got here, I thought, okay, for all the ones that couldn't, for all the ones that sat on the phone and cried with me, I'll speak. So I did.
Yeah, you're going to make me cry a little. That is so emotional, right?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, those phone calls suck. I don't wish for anybody to have to listen to something like that. I really, really don't, because they sucked.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, there's so many other areas of our society where we see where people are banned in some way or another. And so I think, for all the marginalized groups out there, there's that same thread of not being legal. And, certainly your housing not being legal is, huge and hugely devastating, and to have to hide. And
right.
Yep. And to not feel, it's just such a weight, right? So you go from the weight of not having enough, financial resources because of the cost of housing to a place where you feel that financial weight of, I'm not allowed to be here thing.
Right. So we went through it all. So it wasn't really like I'm going to go out and advocate. Just that I didn't really want to be an advocate. I'm just the person that built a house, like I'm just the regular person that built the house, and I got my piece of land and I fought through everything and I bought what they would allow me to live on. I'm not in it to make money. I'm not in it to be a star. I just don't want anybody else to have to hear the same things that I heard. So, yeah.
So is that what your book is about? Is it about the legalized process that you went through?
It's not really, there's some of the process, but it tells our story from when we first started all the way up until just after purchasing the land. And then for every area where, like, if I lived in a campground, I interviewed somebody else that lived in a campground. When I moved my house, I interviewed the transit company. I spoke with realtors about buying the land. I interviewed somebody about that. So there's 16 interviews from other tiny house dwellers and professionals, because I didn't really love living in a campground, but there are people that do. So I wanted to share both sides of that. And it's a workbook. And it's, you always get the people, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to do this. I don't even know how to, go about making something like this happen. So I thought, okay, I'll share my story, which is part of it. And I'll share all these interviews with other people to kind of give some perspective, but I'll actually make worksheets throughout. So people can kind of walk through the process. Like, if you're thinking about building, like, here's a list where you can keep track of all the tools that you'll need. And here's how to do a layout. And here's how I did mine. And here's how somebody else did her layout. And how we came up, how we searched out builders, how to talk to zoning, just all the way through as much information as I could put in there, but make it in a way that somebody else could use it for their needs. Because they're not going to go build my house and be happy. Like, most people don't want my tiny house. So it's too tiny. But everybody's tiny house is custom and different and made for them. And so I'm like, this needs to be a way to help guide them to get to what they want to do, whether they want to live in an RV park, buy land, live in a community. But yeah, so that's really what it is. In the core is a workbook. It's a guidebook where you can keep track of all of that, even phone numbers for zoning officials and people that you're talking to. And it's done pretty well. I've had a lot of very nice reviews and responses on it. And obviously, as you saw in Georgia, there's still a lot of people lining up to get that book. So
that's awesome.
It has been a good tool, I think, for most people to be able to make it happen.
And kind of like a journal too, because, this tiny transition for all of us is kind of like our best story, really.
Right.
And so if you don't document it, then you don't, you forget the details. And so,
right.
Writing it down and, just being able to look through that and see, how you progress and remember those really, special memories. I have, so many just little stories and anecdotes of our journey that aren't documented anywhere that eventually I'll forget them all. So what a great way for people to, kind of use that workbook that you created to tell their own story.
Yeah.
So what do you think the biggest misconception is out there about tiny living?
Oh, I'm going to hit you hard with this one.
Oh, good.
You're gonna live a simple life. And that's the party line. We're going to live simply. And I haven't found a lot simple about this process. From building is not, it's not rocket science. Okay, but it is hard work. It's not simple, just throw a couple things together. It takes a lot of work. Finding parking takes a lot of work. Finding land takes even more work. And my husband and I are not people that hire people to do things for us. So when our well broke, we've repaired our own well. We've installed most everything on this property ourselves. We've built our own skirting. We've built our own decks. We've done all the work, and that's all physical work. And it does simplify your life. It does in that aspect of you don't have a big house to clean and your expenses and that kind of stuff drops. But in order to get to the part, in order to, can we jump to the good part? The work that it takes to get to that good part is really overlooked. And I think that that's what turns a lot of people away from tiny living in groups or other places. They're like, oh, well, where do I buy and where do I park? And everybody's like, well, you have to find a builder and we're telling them all the steps. And they're just like, well, that's too much work. Well, the result of that work for my husband and I now is we live on an acre of our own land with our expenses being less than $300 a month, and we will be able to retire early. Was it easy to get here? No. Did I cry a lot? Yes. Was there blood, sweat, and tears? There always is. Sleepless nights, we had them. But the result of just the pushing forward got us to the spot where now I have gardens and chickens, and life is simpler. And the regular day problems of the world do not stop. Cars are going to break down, whatever's going to happen. And it does make it a little bit easier in that aspect, but you still have a house to care for, and houses take paint and caulking, and they have things that break in them, just like big houses, especially when you put them on the road, like through a tornado.
Yeah.
And so I think the party line, is, even though I'm sitting on the good side of it now, the party line is that this is a lot quicker. And for us, it has not been a lot quicker. We're going on 6 years now. We still have debt on the land to pay off. We're still slowly fixing up our land. It will leave us in a wonderful position, and we are definitely reaping those rewards. But by no means was it an easy process to do.
Yeah, I love that. There's a saying that floats around in my head about nothing worth doing is ever easy. And, people who want to take an easy path, there's going to be, hard parts. I mean, being human is hard, right?
Right.
Um, there are, of course, easier paths, but they don't have necessarily all the compounding, good parts that
Right.
doing this. But you do have to put a lot of work on the front end. And, I'm right there with you from a work perspective. Like I'm all about, getting dirty and doing the work ourselves because it's sweat equity. Right.
Right.
And so when you do the work yourself, you're creating that value in your living space or whatever project you're working on, whether it's building a business or,
Yeah.
starting your permaculture garden, which is my
Right.
my next undertaking, which seems really,
Yay!
really hard, really hard. I am like
Really hard.
daunted by the whole thing, but it's worth it, right? Because then you can look back and you can, not only do you get the value that you created, but you get so much personal growth out of it
Right.
that at the end you aren't scared of a, radial saw and you're not
Right.
scared by, a leaky something, right? Because, we
Right.
can fix that. We
Yeah,
fixed a
not a
million things
problem.
before, right? So
Right.
it's an amazing growth process. So what do you think about that whole concept, of that mid-career professional, kind of in that grind, right? I've been, went to college, graduated at, 22 or whatever, been doing the thing I'm supposed to do, have a couple of decades in now, and it just is just a grind. And I'm expected to do this again, for day after day after day for another, 2 decades or whatever. So do you think that tiny living can relieve the pressure of those mid-career professionals who are willing to shift their work a little bit, just another area of their life and kind of shift their focus to not needing so much stuff?
I think it can, depending on where they're at, right? I mean, not only just like emotionally and financially, but where they're physically at location wise. I think until we have some real true dramatic legal parking, it's not going to be as impactful for any group of people. Because all of the people like you and me are moving or going where we're being allowed. Many people can't leave their families and stuff to do that yet.
Yeah.
Or don't want to, which justifiably so. I mean, we live in the middle of nowhere now. Would it have been our first choice? No, but this is where the county was like, we'll let you live here legally. And we're like, sold. So, I mean, but from a financial point, yes, of course. I mean, the financial benefits to this within the first couple years is you're not just going to jump in and everything's going to run smoothly in the first year. But within the first couple of years, I think you could be sitting in a very good financial position if you have legal parking in a place where you could still work. Because I think if you're in the mid-career, you're not just going to completely stop right away.
Mm-hmm.
So you're still going to have somewhere where you can commute or get to make a living. As far as personally, like with, I think there needs to be a pretty big mind shift in this country for it to reach that level of people. And that go to work and do it every day. Because when you're in that mindset, and I remember, because it was like you get up in the morning and I got to go to work, and after work, I got to go here and I got to hit the gym, and then I got to do this and I got to meet so-and-so, and I got to get home, walk the dog and cook dinner for my husband, and the car just broke. And now I got to go take that in to get a shop. And did we get into the dentist this week? And my neighbors, I need to watch her little kid. You're not there. That list is like rolling in your mind. And then I got to pay the bills, and then I got to do that. And there is no stop. There's not, because it's not there. And then you wake up in the morning and the list is running again. And until that list says enough, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know if, so many of the people that I worked with in that professional group are in that. And to get through that is really tough. Do I hope that will help that class of people? Yeah, I do, because I think they're probably the ones that need it really bad. But I think there's a lot of barriers for them for that, for everything that they struggle with day to day, and even being able to see that there's another side to that where it does stop. And I think the thing for me was my father passing away. And I was kind of like, I get one life. I'm spending it every day going to an office where I'm getting yelled and grabbed and shaken and threatened and screamed at. And am I going to do this for the rest of my life? Like, I have one life. And sometimes that's maybe what it needs to be for people to hear. You have one life. And if you're doing something every single day that you hate, make it stop. You don't get another redo on today. Yeah. So, and there's not enough people that see that. It's the instant gratification. It's, I got to buy the newest car. It's the, I got to have all this stuff. But at the end of the day, are you happy? Like, you have all the stuff. Are you happy? Like, and I think our culture's starting to change and go in that direction a little more. But we got a long way to go.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how to answer that. Like, I definitely think it could be. I just don't think we're there yet for the majority.
Yeah. And then you and I, talked a little bit the last time we chatted about, there is this sort of financial crisis looming for, I'm Gen X, right? So Gen X hasn't saved enough, hasn't prepared themselves, for the future. What is enough? I mean, that's a whole nother question, but, they're not, they haven't been preparing for a version of themselves that, frankly, our culture encourages us not to, sort of value, and that's our older selves, right? We're so obsessed with our, youth. But in any case, we're not saving for our future selves and our future needs. And so then we're kind of facing this point at which, there's not going to be a way to have it all, right? For these folks moving forward. And so that does require a mind shift, right? If you can't have it all, then what is it you're willing to give up? And is a smaller roof a lever that you can pull in your life to allow you to have more of something else that you want in your life,
Absolutely.
Moving forward?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about your story and looking back, and maybe this is a redundant question, but, looking back, like overall, how do you see this transition for yourself? And, if you had to kind of sum it up, what has been the biggest lesson or biggest impact of this transition to Tiny for you?
I think the biggest, and I don't know that it's really redundant because I haven't really touched on it, but I think the biggest impact for me is knowing that even one small person can do hard things. Because again, you're in the corporate world, you're in the clog, like you're just a clog in the wheel. You're spinning, you're doing what you're told. When you step out of that and you start actually doing things, and when I started talking and when I started sharing, building my house, and people were asking questions and I could answer a question. And, people would call me and go, hey, where can you, park legally? And I would say, well, I have a friend here. I know here's somebody. And all of a sudden that, something I said did matter. It helped somebody. And I hadn't helped anybody in a really long time. And I certainly had not helped myself. And I was not helpful in my marriage because I was just drowning on this wheel. And so I would say, the ability to go tiny and come out of that, I got my confidence back. I got the ability to help other people and know that what I offered was important to somebody else. I have never been a public speaker in my life. I had never gone live on Facebook ever. No. Well, would I go live with no makeup? No way. Now I barely even wear any makeup. So my level of my self-esteem is so much higher. And, you'll see people and they'll try to sell you something. And then you're like, yeah, you want me to put new windows in your house? And I'm like, I built my whole house. I'm good. Like there's just pride in what you've done, pride in that work, and not to sound conceited, because I'm very humble about everything that it took to get me here. But there is pride in all of that. And I think it makes you a stronger person. And so now when I speak at zoning meetings to officials, I'm not scared of them. I don't think I could have ever spoken at a zoning meeting before. I've been like, hi, now I'm like, it's me again, like we're going to go through this. But it's, definitely given me a voice and given me ability to speak up for myself and speak up for others too. And I don't think I had it. I had lost it.
Awesome.
So
finding your voice. Wow. So what advice do you have for folks that are listening to us that are still on the fence?
Still on the fence. Still on the fence. I don't miss being still on the fence. I don't really know that I could offer any true, decision making, advice for anybody that was on the fence. But I can say that, just because somebody teaches you something doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. Okay. And there are many ways to live and many ways to design homes and many ways in which we have millions of jobs in the world and so many different ways to find our passion and things that we love and we care about. And, when you're a little kid, maybe think about what made you happy. Like, what did you want to do? What did you love? And would littler you be proud of you? And if not, then it's time to change. And if going tiny can aid in doing something that makes your life happier, then please take that step.
Yeah. It kind of goes back to what you said about yourself. Learn to listen to your own voice.
Right.
And stop looking outside of yourself for the answer of what you're supposed to do and listen to yourself.
Right. Right. And sometimes we're just scared. And it's okay to be scared. I was terrified through all of it. And I was like, I'm going to build this and I'm going to go live illegally. Yay. That was scary because this is someone who has played the rules her whole life. So don't let fear stand in the way. Don't let that be the thing that tells you no. Let it be something else, but don't let it be the fear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much. Please share with the listeners where they can follow you and find your book. And of course, we'll include this in show notes. But for people that just come off of this and want to Google, where do they find you?
Sure. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok at Serenitas Tiny Living. And then Tiny House Alliance USA is our nonprofit. And my books are on Amazon. It's Trailblazing Tiny, and Trailblazing Tiny Tales is the ebook series. And yeah, you can find me through all that.
Well, Melanie, thank you so much. Thank you for your true voice here on this podcast today and for sharing your story. I hope that it will be wildly inspirational, especially to our women listeners, about what you can accomplish if you just listen to your own voice and you hear the fear and you do it anyway. Because I think more people need to, kind of take this moment and reconsider their path. So thank you for sharing yours.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And it was a pleasure. I enjoyed it too.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Less House, More Moolah. To access valuable financial tips and resources tailored to your tiny living journey, join our exclusive community at thetinyhouseadvisor.com. Here you'll find a supportive network of like-minded individuals committed to helping each other navigate the challenges and celebrate the victories of embracing a minimalist lifestyle. So don't miss out on the opportunity to be part of this empowering tribe. Be sure to tune in next Thursday for another insightful episode of Less House, More Moolah, where we'll continue to explore practical solutions and inspiring stories to help you create the life you've always dreamed of.
Please see the show notes for important disclosure regarding the Tiny House Advisor LLC and this episode.